Welcome. My name is Jeff Everhart. I am a developer advocate with Knock, and today I'm here with Brad Sickles, the founder and CEO of Nullstone, an internal developer platform that's backed by Y Combinator. So thanks for joining us today, Brad. I know we're going to have a really good conversation about just dev tools in general, and then some new alerting features that you've launched for Nullstone. So how's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to have you. And I'm really excited to learn a bit more about Nullstone. So Nullstone's tagline is that you can deploy any app and architecture to the cloud. So can you explain to our viewers like what Nullstone is and how it might fit into that wider DevTools ecosystem? So like, what do you see being your sort of adjacent products, or how do you differentiate yourselves from some of these other, I guess, developer platforms?
Absolutely. Yeah. So as you mentioned, we're an internal developer platform. And for most people, they may not know exactly what that means because there's a lot of terminology around that. So I'll give some context. If you can imagine, your PaaS systems, Heroku being the most notable one. These give developers incredible power to launch and manage and operate their products when they're getting started. However, most people tend to move off of those as the costs get high, as the complexity rises, as there's more team members. There's many reasons why a team moves off of a PaaS. And that's where an internal developer platform comes in, where we still give you the same features of a PaaS, but it's running on your own infrastructure, sometimes many third-party toolings that you have, external log and metrics and telemetry systems, lots and lots of complexity usually going into those systems, but ultimately still giving the developers that quick, fast experience. And so kind of tying back to that tagline, one of the unique propositions of Nullstone is that we don't just handle one single app type or framework or architecture. We can handle it all. So a lot of PaaSes sometimes will be very niche down to focus on a very specific, maybe it's the front end, maybe it's the back end, maybe it's only on a specific framework. We handle all architectures because, again, as architectures evolve, we want to be able to handle that throughout its entire life cycle. So teams aren't constantly migrating between tooling to try and meet their needs.
Okay, that's awesome. And I think if I can recall correctly, Flight Control, sounds like you're very similar to that product, right? That was the first, I think, example of the internal developer platform that I saw before I came across Nullstone. Right. And all I could think to myself was, wow, this is such a great idea, because really you're bringing those developer experience benefits of the platform as a service model directly onto like AWS, GCP, directly onto the clouds. And do you all support like all of the clouds?
That's right. Yeah. So Flight Control is actually one of our batchmates in YC. So same.
Really? Okay, cool.
So yeah, we know them really well. So similar in that we're trying to bring the same experience. They've historically been very much a front end focused from the beginning, because I think they started as like in the React world building.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was like Blitz.
Yeah, Blitz. Yes,
JS,
correct.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of our focus. Our focus is coming. Our experiences came from the back end when we were building lots of large architectures and things like that. So a little bit of a different drive, but very much in the same light that, we're trying to build a nice experience for developers that are using all the different cloud providers. And so today we're supporting right now AWS and GCP. That's where we're seeing most of our customers.
Cool. And so what are some of those like driving ideas behind developer experience and like how you approach that at Nullstone?
Yeah, so we've seen firsthand that developers create better products when they build and run it themselves. Even today, there's so many organizations that claim that they're doing platform engineering, developer self-service. So many developers still don't have the knowledge, the tooling, and information to actually make this feasible. And so one of the kind of the driving ideas behind this is comes from a book called The Art of Clear Thinking, which was written by a fighter pilot. And one of the frameworks that he outlines in that is called ACE, ACE for short, which stands for Assess, Choose, and Execute. And one of the kind of the key insights of that framework is that humans make better decisions when they're only focused on either assessing, choosing, or executing, and not mixing them up. And so I think this kind of stems from a lot of what people say, like, I'm in the zone and I'm coding, I feel productive. I think that's a great I think that's not a coincidence that the developers are feeling it. Like that's a very a good intuition to know that like they're getting something done, they're making progress. And so a lot of what of Nullstone's built around is this concept of giving transparency, experimentation, and governance, so that developers, when they're in the assess phase, they get full transparency. They're not seeing pieces of it. It's not hidden away behind an infrastructure team. They have full clarity on what's there. And then some experimentation. How do I know what to choose now that I have the full lay of the land? How can I experiment and try things on the product, on the infrastructure, without breaking production? And then when I'm ready, let's automate it and get out of the way so that developers can get back to doing what they do best, which is building great product.
Interesting. How do you see the governance playing into that? I'm just going to dig in because like a lot of what you just said sounds very similar to like the way we think about things at Knock and sort of what we try to enable technical teams to do. So I'm just interested in your thoughts on the governance and how all of that works into this.
Yeah, so historically, governance is seen almost as a bad word next to compliance.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does.
Let's hold the developers. Let's prevent them from doing something. However, I've seen through both my experiences and throughout teams we've served that usually developers, they have an appetite to build and run things, but they don't have the time or focus or desire to do everything. They don't want to build a Kubernetes cluster from scratch on bare metal. Like they may want to play and launch a Kubernetes cluster, but like once they have it running, they just want to get back to focusing on their efforts. And so governance is really about how can we empower developers where the fast path, the golden path is super quick to go down and they're not encumbered by the other things. And again, that governance does tie back to experimentation, because if developers only have that single path to go down and can't stray, it's very restricting to making good decisions, learning new tooling, discovering and trying new things. And so the experimentation works hand in hand with that governance so that when they're ready to go fast, they can.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. When they're ready to go fast, they can. Yeah. And I do see like that sort of natural tension that you mentioned between governance and experimentation. And just I'll sort of draw a corollary with how we talk about this at Knock. Like obviously as sort of a multiplayer notifications platform, like governance is one of those things that we enable. We've got this commit model where you can sort of, promote, you basically have checks and balances on what makes it to production, where a lot of the simpler systems that people come from are like, well, I just made some changes to some HTML. Here was my testing procedure. But it's really difficult for like the full organization to get visibility into that stuff. And so it does sort of like allow them, I think, to move faster because with more confidence, basically. And so you can experiment, but do it more responsibly. And so I think tools like that are really cool because it is like at some point in time, you're right. No, but this is a part of the job that nobody really is like jazzed about doing. So like, how do we make this easier? How do we make this easier for a wider variety of people to be involved in that process? And then like get the developers back to whatever it was that they were doing to ship a product or a piece of infrastructure or whatever.
Yeah, I noticed, I may be jumping ahead here, but I think
go for it.
That feature around like being able to commit to different stages, it's when we saw that when we first started playing with Knock, it was like, wow, this is in line with our thinking because one of the interesting pieces of it is you don't know when you press that save button or that update button, where's that going? What's it going to do? Is this going to affect production? Like you're afraid as a developer to press that. But if you know that when I press that, it's not going to immediately clobber everything and you get a chance to review and approve, like, yes, this is actually what I want to do. Like we had some of the exact same workflows within Nullstone. So it definitely is a very neat feature of Knock.
Good. Because I think that's exactly how we modeled it, right? And exactly for those reasons. Like we wanted to give you the comfort that this change, you could roll it out incrementally. You had the ability to test it. And then when we look at a lot of sort of the other tools that are in this space, like I'm not going to say our direct competitors, but like in the larger messaging notification space, they don't really support those separated logical environments like we do. And I think that's something that's really important to developers. And like you can see in the forums, people are like, well, how do I handle development and production in like this tool? And it's like, well, you make another environment and you copy and paste all your stuff over when it's done. And there's not this clear path for here's something I'm experimenting with. Now here's something that's ready for everybody to test. Now here's something that's ready to go live. And like that is obviously something that's built into Knock. So you recently had a really successful launch week at Nullstone where you launched a bunch of different features, and one of those features was a Slack alerting feature for Nullstone that uses Knock under the hood. So could you give me some of the background on like what did you hear from your customers and why you all decided that was an important feature to build?
Yeah, so this was driven by a few requests, but there was outstanding from all of them. Our number one request across the board was alerting. Tell me,
Okay.
don't make me go find information. Don't make me go seek it out. Just tell me again. This is back to I'm in my zone. I have a couple tools that I want to stay in. One of them being Slack, and also we do have shared customer channels where we help guide DevOps strategy questions that any team may have. And so again, like all the Nullstone communication with our customers goes through that. And so again, our number one request was tell me when my app is deployed, whether it's successful or failed. Also, again, that approval system that Knock has, we have a similar system with infrastructure updates where we go out and plan the changes and say, are you sure you want to make these changes to your infrastructure? Many times developers would queue those up, walk away thinking they were going to get changed, and everybody forgets, and days later, we gotta go make those up.
Publish, yeah.
We gotta actually hit the save the go button, basically. And so again, that was where like let's put everything in Slack where they're already working. Give them like, hey, your app deployed. Hey, your infrastructure needs to be approved to be changed, and that way, kind of working the same model as GitHub, where you get notifications on pull requests and comments. Another avenue, but again, working all the communication going through their existing tooling rather than having to jar their workflow.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I think I hear that from pretty much every organization that tries to create some sort of Slack-based feature is some variation of that. Like we wanted to give them the information in flow where they were already working. And I think that's just such a cool thing about the chat apps nowadays. And have you had any requests for Teams at all? Or other chat based? Okay.
Not for Teams yet. No, we have had from Discord, but not Teams yet.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, cool. Do you think that this is, you could maybe give us a quick demo of like Nullstone and maybe this Slack alerting feature?
Absolutely. Would love to.
Awesome.
Alrighty. So, as you mentioned, we launched our GitOps full GitOps support a couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and one of the interesting things in that was we see infrastructure as being more than just where is my application hosted. It can be anything connected to it, and so part of that we see is Knock being infrastructure, right? Like, how does my developers operate this application? That's part of the infrastructure. And so in this repo, this is actually our docs repo where we store all of our documentation and we go through the same PR process as we test our products out. We want to know when our apps have been deployed. And so there's a section of code here that we drop into our GitOps file, which basically signals that we want to run, we want to notify in our Slack channel here, the Nullstone Slack channel, every time the app has been deployed. And there's many other actions that we can run throughout our system, and you could list them out. And there's a lot of other filters that we could put on this. Maybe you only want to do it for certain applications or certain pieces of infrastructure. And again, I didn't put it in this one, but you can also say like whenever the infra needs approval, we can pop that into the actions section.
That's
as well.
so cool. Like, I think it's cool that this Slack alerting feature exists because, like, again, that's something I hear from a lot of businesses. But the idea that you all have taken it to the next level and made that configuration available via code just honestly blows my mind. Like, it's really that cool.
Well,
so
this
go for it.
Yeah, so this was that the concept of putting it in code was honestly by accident.
Really?
One of the features that we offer as part of our product is preview environments, and these are not your typical like we launch an app for you. This is we will launch and manage the entire stack, production like environment. So your database, your network, your cluster, the applications, all the glue that connects them, all of the IAM, the firewalls, the IAM policies, all of those are identical to your production environment.
Okay.
And as we were doing that, a lot of our our customers wanted to be able to customize a couple things because usually preview environments are usually different from in a couple ways. One of them is they usually want to use like a shared Postgres cluster, so they're not standing up tons and tons of RDS,
seeding a bunch of data and stuff like that.
Data, right? So they said, can we just put that? The only logical place to put that was in the code, along with when they opened the pull request, it would use this configuration code to launch. And so as we went through this, we're like, well, wait a second. We're going to also want, developers to be able to change eventing also based on preview environments or what environment you're in. Maybe you don't want to alert on dev or staging. And so this became like a natural place for why to put it in code as to put it in the UI. It just became a lot easier for developers. So that in a pull request, you say, hey, I'm about to launch this new code, but I've also just done Slack notifications. Can we test that as part of the pull request as well?
That's awesome. That's super cool. And so, yeah, let's go back to this. I mean, maybe we touched on this a little bit, but like obviously alerts seem to be really important for dev tools. And I guess why do you think that is? And like, what have you all stumbled upon any best practices or things you'd want to share about like creating alerts for developers?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of a few classes, Slack notifications being the first one. It's really, again, I kind of harp back to this this governance of when you're working in teams larger than a few people, 5, 10, and even when you get into larger teams, it's very hard to keep people in sync as to what's going on. And so keeping these asynchronous communications, I've worked on teams where we've had people in Belgium and in India, all across the world in different time zones. And it's hard to have a good sense of like what happened throughout the day when I was asleep or offline, or maybe I had a doctor's appointment, I had to come back. Having a nice single flow of where those things come in Slack has always been critical to building a good, again, transparent communication between all the teams instead of these one-off channels here and there. And the second is there's a lot of use cases where developers want to perform actions as a result of other actions.
Okay.
So harping back to the preview environments, if you wanted to run a bunch of migrations or seed a bunch of data, fuzz them, whatever, you can write those custom, but a lot of times you need to be inside your network to perform those actions. And so Nullstone gives you the tooling to say, when an app is launched or deployed for the first time, we're going to run some seed data. So we're going to pull data from like a production dump that's been fuzzed, and we're going to load that into our database at will. So it's getting back to like that communication and codifying everything so that when you're ready to go fast, you can go fast, and you don't have to think about the one-off configuration issues.
That's cool. That's awesome. And so let's talk about maybe how you use Knock here to build this feature. Cause I know that you and I, if I recall correctly, went on sort of like a deep dive into our managed Slack APIs to get some of this stuff working. So like, what was that process like for you? And why was this something that you decided to reach for like a third party to build?
Yeah. So there are a few reasons. As we are an internal developer platform, one of our philosophies is not to build everything from scratch, but use the existing technologies. And this comes from not just a technical strategy perspective of don't build stuff that's not unique to your value prop.
Yeah.
It also comes from the sense of our customers want to use the tools that they're already comfortable with. And so we need to meet them where they are. So it's kind of coupled in terms of, why should we buy instead of building this technology? And second, once we've gotten to the buy phase, we should probably buy from this. It comes down to, okay, what's the best technology that fits with how our customers are going to use it, how we're going to be able to want to add on to it later. And Knock became the clear outstanding winner, obviously for the governance reasons, as we play along with it. But everything became very obvious that we could add on to this at any time to, add on Slack notifications, team notifications, add on triggers so that when events happen, we can do certain things. Or if we want to add webhooks so that when someone wants to subscribe to a webhook, it was all the features that you could get from other tooling like a GitHub. We just had out of the box very quickly. And so it became a clear winner that gave us exactly what we needed to execute, and very quickly. I think it took us, we spent a week off and on of, discovering, researching tools, thinking about how we would architect it. By the next week, we spent the entire week and we were fully implemented from start to finish.
That's cool.
So it was a very quick execution and turnaround.
And I think that's even cooler to me, knowing that you all sort of went with a custom path. And just for context for our listeners, like one of the things that we try to do at Knock, and I think a lot of developers try to do, is we try to provide like a variety of different entry points into using the technology. And so like on the most managed end of our Slack integrations, you have something called Slack Kit, where they're like drop-in React components that are wired up to Knock's APIs so that really you could implement this very easily if you're using that stack. And then on the other end, like we took those same APIs that we use for our own built-in components and expose those so that developers can use them. And I think ultimately like the latter portion is the path that you all took, where you use some of the built-in APIs to like manage the OAuth process, if I recall correctly. And so that's just really cool to hear. And I think ultimately, like, if I can, circle back to our beginning discussion about like what's important with DevTools, it's like obviously providing those different levels of customizability, because like that's something that we don't really want developers to run into, right? To like feel handcuffed by the platform and all of a sudden I can't do this thing that I want to be able to do. I can't make this customization. And again, something we've strived to do at Knock is to make it feel like if you would have built this in-house, that's the goal. It's like we want this to feel like what it would have felt like if you were to have built this in-house. And sometimes we get there, sometimes we're still working, but always a process.
Yeah, I mean, the flexibility, there was a lot of out of the box that we got, but there's a lot of flexibility. And especially during, and this relates back to the DevTools conversation we were having earlier, that as we were going through proof of concept, we needed to understand, like, is this going to serve our needs? Like, are we going to hit a roadblock? Are we going to hit a wall where we just can't go any further? And it's like, great, we made it 80%, but we can't go that extra 20%.
Yeah, exactly.
Reasons. And, Knock was a natural fit in our ecosystem because it was all these things out of the box that were not forcing us down a certain path that we were kind of coding ourselves in the quarter, so to speak. But again, the React components, like we have a Vue.js front end, and so we're like, okay, are we going to get stuck here where we can't do this because we're not using React? And we jumped on the Slack, the Slack community channel for Knock, and got tremendous help, kind of guiding us through, like, okay, how was the React components architected? Now that we understand that, it wasn't a large leap to get to how can we just change a little bit of front end code and customize it in Vue, doing basically the exact same things that the React kit, the Slack kit does with React components. And that was, I mean, I think that took us a day from start to finish to kind of reason about, understand, and implement, how would that work in Vue.js. So
that's cool.
Very quick turnaround. But again, it harkens back to during our proof of concept, our trial and experimentation phase. We went really fast, and when we got stuck, there was a lot of help to get us over the edge and a lot of flexibility to get there.
Cool. And it does sound like, I feel like both Knock and Nullstone come from like maybe the same principled background, right? Where it's like the idea that more, how do I want to say this? Like when you were talking about the platform as a service, right? Your internal developer platform on top of the sort of large cloud ecosystem just provides way more flexibility than you're going to get from some of these other more managed providers, and that every team eventually is going to, not eventually, but lots of teams will eventually reach the boundary or the top of what that platform allows them to do. And then how do we implement this next 10, 20%? And it ends up being really difficult.
Exactly. That's spot on. I mean, I can speak to this one vendor in particular just because they're such a big vendor already. But I've had an experience in my past working with Auth0, and it was a great experience out of the box. You got moving really quickly, but the minute you try to do any type of custom authorization, you were kind of stuck. And it was like, man, that little bit of flexibility goes a long way to, like, you got this shiny demo and you can get it out to customers really quickly, but on day 1, on day 10, on day 100, can you add that feature your product manager is begging for, or your customers are begging for? Like, can you pull that off? And like, so far, our experience with Knock is like, yeah, we can keep moving. It's not going to be a wall for us.
Yeah, awesome. That's like, yeah, that's what I always talk internally. I'm like, the value in this is our abstractions, because like that is what I think when the system was architected from its earliest like point was, how would this feel if I built this in house? And I ultimately, like Sam and Chris built this for, part of that infrastructure for another company. So learned a lot of lessons about like, how does this scale? How do I make this flexible so that I can tap into it at all these different levels and access the primitives or, the APIs directly to get done what I need to get done. But that's awesome. Yeah. So is there anything else that you want to share kind of with our audience about Nullstone? Your experience with building DevTools, anything you want to leave our viewers with?
Yeah. I think kind of the interesting thing is, if teams are looking to move from a PaaS to a cloud provider, if they're looking to hire their first DevOps engineer, we've worked with a lot of our customers in the past to be that fractional DevOps or that additional resource. We work very closely with a lot of our customers to really focus on the outcomes, not on the tooling per se. Like, we care more about the outcomes, work backward to the tooling. Mm-hmm. That offer's out there to get in contact with us. It's something we're starting to be more public with about is offering that fractional DevOps as part of our offering. So
awesome.
That's something that again, just like the Knock community Slack, we like to have the same philosophy. Like, it's flexible, but like if you're stuck, like we want to be there to help you get you to the finish line.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Okay. Well, cool. Brad, thanks so much for coming on today. I've super enjoyed our conversation about DevTools, alerting, all of it. So we appreciate your time, and definitely I'll leave some links to Nullstone in the description of the YouTube video, and give us a shout out on social.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. It was great to be here.
All right.
See ya.
Cool.